Night of November 11th, 1940, 8:30 p.m., Mediterranean Sea. A slow, fragile biplane flies low over the black water. Waves catch and reflect the flashes of Italian searchlights. Its canvas wings tremble in the wind. Two men whisper inside the freezing cockpit, with nothing between them and death but fabric, rope, and luck. How can something this slow, this loud, this outdated defeat one of the most heavily armed navies in the Axis? The obsolete biplane that torpedoed more Axis ships than modern fighters combined. The Fairey Swordfish entered service in 1936, the same year Germany flew the Bf 109, Italy fielded sleek Savoia Marchetti bombers, and America was already testing all-metal monoplane. Yet Britain's Fleet Air Arm sailed into war with a machine of canvas, wires, and wood.
Obsolete wasn't just an insult, it was the Royal Navy's own classification. The Swordfish was supposed to be replaced by 1939, but the replacement never came. These were not fighter aces, not daredevils. They were naval airmen trained to fly at night, inches above the sea, engines barely whispering, trusting maps drawn by hand. The Swordfish is slow but steady. In darkness, you feel her more than you see the horizon. We fly not by instruments, but by instinct.
Britain's supply routes to Malta, Alexandria, and through the Suez Canal were being strangled by the Italian fleet. 6 battleships, 19 cruisers, dozens of destroyers. Taranto harbor was their fortress. Italian battleships threatened British convoys. The Royal Navy lacked modern bombers, and the only aircraft capable of night torpedo attacks was the Swordfish. Given the shortage of modern monoplanes, operational necessity dictates continued use of the Swordfish. They had nothing else. But the Swordfish carried one hidden advantage. Its slow speed made it ideal for torpedo attacks.
Approach at 90 knots. Drop to 60 to 100 feet. Release torpedo at 400 to 800 meters from the target. Aircraft must stay level for 5 seconds after release, then pull up to avoid the splash and light defensive fire. 1,600 pounds, a 176-kilogram TNT warhead, entering the water at 27 to 40 knots, with an anti-roll mechanism for shallow water entry. Italian harbor defenses assumed no plane could drop torpedoes in Taranto. The water was too shallow, but the Swordfish could.
HMS Illustrious, 7:15 p.m. The deck vibrates with tension. Swordfish crews receive their final briefing. Altitude 150 feet until 2 miles out. Descent to 60 feet for torpedo drop. Target ships Conte di Cavour, Littorio, Duilio. Total attacking aircraft 21 Swordfish. No modern fighters, no bombers, just canvas wings against steel battleships. Remember, fly low, even lower than you think possible. Their guns can't depress far enough. If we see the water's reflection on the wings, we're too high.
The first wave descends into darkness. Searchlight sweet tracer fire arcs upward. Flak bursts like white flowers over the harbor. The Italians fire blindly into the night. They expect modern bombers. They expect fast monoplanes. What they get instead is something so slow, the gunners overshoot it. Italian gunners later described the Swordfish as moving like a man on a bicycle. But that was the secret. Swordfish, introduced in 1936, declared obsolete. Crews, trained for extreme low-altitude night attacks. Political and strategic necessity forced its continued use. And that slow speed made torpedo runs exceptionally accurate.
Taranto. The attack begins with 21 Swordfish approaching the harbor. Italy's fleet is moments away from the first true naval aircraft knockout blow in history. The first wave of 12 Swordfish breaks formation and descends through the low cloud. Below them, Taranto harbor, glowing faintly beneath blackout restrictions and the pale moon. The Italians believed Taranto was untouchable, protected by anti-torpedo nets, barrage balloons, heavy flak guns, and shallow water only 12 meters deep. Every naval expert agreed, no aircraft can drop a torpedo here. His goggles fog. His flight jacket is soaked with sea spray. Ice forms along the cockpit rim. November humidity freezing at 80 knots.
Hold steady. Keep to 60 feet. There she is, Cavour-class battleship, port side. The Italians still had no idea the British were coming, not until the first Swordfish flew directly over a flak battery, and they finally saw it. A biplane. A fabric-winged biplane. In 1940, the disbelief lasted only seconds. To hit a battleship, the Swordfish had to fly lower than the mast height of fishing boats. Drop speed, 92 miles per hour. Drop altitude, exactly 60 to 80 feet. The harbor opens into full view. Battleship Comte de Cavour sits massive and motionless. Searchlights carve wide arcs through the darkness.
Steady. Hold her level. Williamson's Swordfish sinks even lower until its wheels almost skim the surface. Waves just 3 feet below. Italian gunners aim too high. Their shells pass clean over the Swordfish, ironically protecting it. This was the biplane's secret weapon. Speed so slow it broke the enemy's aim. Torpedo away. The Mark 12 stabilizes, its anti-roll mechanism kicking in. It runs shallow, exactly as British engineers intended. The torpedo travels 700 meters, strikes Comte de Cavour's port side, and detonates 2 magazines. It is the first time in history that carrier aircraft disabled a battleship at anchor. Not all Swordfish carried torpedoes. Some carried 16 6-inch bombs to destroy fuel tanks, hangars, and ammunition stores. Pilot Lieutenant Clifford Jock Marshall dives his Swordfish toward a fuel tank farm. Flak shrapnel tears through the wings. Hold it. Releasing. Explosions roll across the harbor. Oil tanks erupt. Fire blooms over the port in a sweeping orange glow. Taranto was meant to be as safe as Scapa Flow. Instead, the Swordfish turned it into an inferno.
9 more Swordfish enter the burning harbor, guided by the flames. Pilot John Hale sees the battleship Littorio lit up like a stage set. Italian crewmen race across the decks, some firing machine guns, others flooding ammo stores. Poor bastards, they can see us now. But visibility cuts both ways. Altitude, 70 feet. Speed, 95 miles per hour. Range, 500 meters. Hale releases his torpedo at the perfect moment. Littorio turns hard to starboard. Too late. Impact. Explosion. A plume of water rises 3 decks high. Littorio is hit 3 times in 20 minutes. Her bow is shredded. Her magazines flood. She settles into the mud.
Inside Taranto's command bunker, Admiral Inigo Campioni watches red signal lights flare across the operations map. We believed the aircraft were American. No one imagined a biplane could do this. Communications break down. Smoke blankets the harbor. Damage control teams battle fires with seawater hoses. Crews open scuttles to keep ships from capsizing. But the Swordfish keep coming. Italian anti-aircraft batteries fire 14,000 shells, scoring almost nothing. Why?
The guns were calibrated for 250 to 300 miles per hour targets. The Swordfish flew at 90. Predictive gunnery systems failed. Shell fuses detonated behind the biplanes. Engineers later admitted the Swordfish flew below our mathematical models. In a war defined by radar, code breaking, and machines of steel and aluminum, the Fairey Swordfish should have been obsolete the moment the first modern fighter took flight. But it didn't.
From Taranto to the North Atlantic, Swordfish crews braved storms, ice, and flak that would have grounded any modern aircraft. Accuracy, endurance, courage. That is what made a biplane legendary. By war's end, the Swordfish had sunk more ships than many modern squadrons. It was slow. It was old. It was outdated. Yet, in the hands of determined crews, it became a weapon that changed the tide of history.
And yet, it was responsible for one battleship crippled, Bismarck.
3 battleships disabled, Cavour, Littorio, Duilio. Dozens of Axis supply ships destroyed. Over a dozen U-boats sunk or forced to surface. It saved convoys across the Atlantic and Arctic. Sometimes the most unlikely weapon becomes the one that turns the tide. Pilots shivered in frost-filled cockpits. Mechanics battled ice and wind on carrier decks. Canvas wings shuddered in gale-force storms. They were not built to survive a world war, but they did. The Fairey Swordfish, a relic of an earlier age, became a symbol of courage, determination, and ingenuity. And it changed the course of history, one slow, daring attack at a time.
In a war defined by radar, code-breaking, and machines of steel and aluminum, the Fairey Swordfish should have faded into obscurity the moment the first modern fighter took flight. But it didn't. Carriers pitching in stormy seas, canvas wings rattling in gale winds, mechanics sweeping ice off control surfaces, pilots with frost clinging to their eyebrows. It survived every prediction, every redesign, every attempt to replace it. Because the war kept demanding the one thing the Swordfish could deliver better than any aircraft of its age: accuracy, endurance, courage.
Enemy vessels sunk, disabled, or fatally damaged, 1939 to 1945. 1 battleship crippled, Bismarck. 3 battleships disabled, Cavour, Littorio, Duilio. Dozens of Axis supply ships destroyed. Over a dozen U-boats sunk or forced to surface. Convoys saved across the Atlantic and Arctic. By war's end, this obsolete biplane had inflicted more ship losses than many entire modern air wings. Final Swordfish Squadron, HMS Vindex, 1945. Pilots gather on the icy deck, engines warming in the cold morning air. From the warm Mediterranean to the freezing North Atlantic, Swordfish crews flew through storms that grounded metal monoplanes and struck targets no one else could reach. They were not built to survive a world war, but they did, and they changed it.
The Fairey Swordfish was slow. It was old. It was outdated. But in the hands of determined crews, it became something more powerful than modernity. A reminder that sometimes the most unlikely weapon becomes the one that turns the tide.